Okay. Isha, I think we're good to go. You can start.
Yeah. All right. Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you today for Rahul Shankhwalker's. He's going to be doing an amazing presentation today on barefoot luxury. And Rahul, as you all know, is a partner at Studio HBA, a firm which I've been watching closely for years now, since I probably got interested in design. And they've done some of the most outstanding projects I've seen. So I'm really excited for Rahul to be part of Digital Design Week. I don't know if you all have been following what we've been trying to do this week. And we're on day 3, and we partnered with Node for our workshops, which they've been amazing. Khushbu, Shweta, and Shanali have really been masterminds in creating something fabulous. So thank you for that. And thank you for collaborating with us and doing this together. And I'm going to hand this over to Rahul to kickstart today's presentation on barefoot luxury.
Isha, thank you so much. Shonali, Shweta, Khushbu, thank you so much for having me here. Honestly, I'm a little nervous speaking with 105 people. God, my heart's beating really fast. Thank you everyone for being here. I think what Isha, Shonali and team have put together in these troubled times is highly commendable. It's great to be sitting by computers and listening to someone random like me talk. I do that all day long as well, and I've heard some incredible people speak. So with that, I'm going to quickly share my screen. Can I share my screen, Shonali?
Yeah, I think you...
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you all see? Okay. Before I get into specifics of what I'm going to talk about, I'll just give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about. Barefoot luxury is probably known to many of us, and it's not a term new in hospitality design. It's not a term that is unknown to people, and it's a term that I suppose all of us feel comfortable in, being in a space and in a time, and especially in a world that we live in, which is saturated with technology, schedules, dress codes, societal norms, what to do, what not to do. Even when we travel on leisure, barefoot luxury is quite the antithesis of this, honestly. It's the luxury of having time on your side. It's the luxury of being informal as opposed to being formal. It's the luxury of not adhering to schedules, not adhering to dress codes, or not adhering to anything other than listening to yourself and immersing yourself in what is around you. I have been designing hotels for over 2 decades now, and honestly, some of the hotels that I've designed in, I wouldn't want to stay in even today because they're just so stiff and they're very formal, and they're like, God, they force me to want to behave and dress in a very specific manner. And about 3-4 years back, I was asked to design this beautiful island in Maldives. And before that, I'd only seen Maldives in photographs, never been there, always wanted to, because the pictures that I saw were just absolutely surreal. And we were asked to design a 6 or 7 hectare island. When we came on board, a part of this island was already designed and built, and it didn't work out with the old design. Yeah. Yeah. So for me, this was a first time. It was the first time designing a property absolutely in the middle of nowhere. And in a couple of years' time, we designed, we built it. And even today, this project probably remains the closest to my heart. And I feel very proud of what my team and I achieved in these circumstances that we were built in. So today I'm going to talk about just one project. We will talk about the process, how we designed in a place where the only context we have is the blue waters. You perceive what is under the water, but you can't really see it. There is no land to be seen anywhere around, no mountains, no trees, nothing. Just a sandbar in the middle of the ocean. That is your context, that is your presence, that is where you are. So I'm going to hit the next slide. Landing into Maldives, I think, and for those of you who've been to Maldives, would agree with me that it's one of the most surreal landings I've ever experienced in my life. All you have, and all the times that I've been to, over 36 times to Maldives, this is what I've seen out of my window. Just reefs, water, beautiful blue, cottony clouds. And the only access to the site is obviously on a speedboat or a water plane. Construction on site has to happen in piecemeals. You know, you've got to build these scaffoldings as opposed to vertical scaffoldings or horizontal scaffoldings in water. And you move from part to part, and you build a little bit, move to the next one, you move to the next area. And it's quite surreal how this whole thing comes together. This is one of the early pictures of the project under construction, and this was when it was all done. How do you design in a place where nothing really exists and your visual references are all but a couple of things around you? How do you do it? And for me and my team, it was almost like being lost in a desert. You know, you can't see anything. But this is, of course, a lot of water and reefs. How do you design? So in situations like this, we realize the best thing to fall back on is to start designing from a point of narratives, of literally writing a story with characters, with people, with love angles, with whatever you felt. I'm not going to get so much into the stories, but with that story, what the story allowed us to do was to then put images like this one, which support that narrative, almost becoming like a set design. From that, you start looking at what are the clues that water can give us. You know, could there be a bunch of floating letters in the water, a trunk, a globe, whatever we could latch onto. So we make visual textures from images of what life is like living in and around water all the time. Shadows on land, water text. One of the things we did was to identify a personality of a woman, a personality of a very flamboyant, very easy, but very easy fashion person. And that image, I don't know, God bless whoever did that image, but it was very supportive of our design presence, from which we try and evolve our colors, our textures, our materials, and identifying what she might like to do. Could she be a diver? Could she be a person who walks on the beach and collects seashells? Could she be a person passionate about marine life? And what is it that we can bring back with us? And at this point in time, we're not even thinking about the structure. We're not thinking about the space. We're just thinking about a personality who is devoid of commitments to time, to schedules, and has an innate sense of fashion. This is one of the early master plans that came to us from the client. What I marked in yellow, orange, or whatever color it shows on your screen on the far right is our project. And this is a part of 3 resorts that eventually are going to get built. We finished the first one. We're building the phase 3, which is actually the phase 2. And in light blue, what you see is the reef. And what the government does is gives you a geological point in the ocean and says, hey, you can build a certain amount here. And there is no island. This island does not exist. You're starting from scratch. You're starting from ground zero. It's just a point. But what is interesting about designing in a constantly moving tidal environment is that your island can't be fixed. You can draw a certain shape on your paper, but that shape has to be verified. That shape has to be validated by the tidal or the current movement. And that eventually gives you a shape which is workable. So that's the island we're going to talk about. This is the site before anything went up on there. This is what we came up with as a master plan. So the entire sandbank or the island area, the land area, as you would like to call it, is roughly about, I think, maybe 5 hectares. I don't know how much that is in terms of square meters, but it's pretty big. So logically speaking, in the center of the island, which has got the least amount of views, goes the back of house. And on this island, everyone who's going to eventually work in the hotel lives here, because you can't go home and come back the next morning. It's not possible. You got to stay here. The waitering staff, housekeeping, general manager, everybody stays here. So the main bay, number 1, that you can see here, that's the reception. And you've got to create a cove so that the tidal waters don't erode the beach. That's the back of house, some beach villas, and these are the water villas. A very early image of when construction started on site. I'm just going to go back. I don't know where exactly in this island this is, but it's somewhere on the island. That's where it starts. You got to pump the sand from the ocean bed to start creating the island. These are the pipelines for pumping the islands. And you got to create housing for people who are going to work here. And some of my best experience on these islands have been staying in one of these. It's just spectacular. It's unbelievable. I've done my first diving here. I've done my first harpoon fishing in these waters here. It's just, so the process itself becomes quite nurturing and fulfilling. One of the images of a more sort of evolved site. And this is when it's pretty much 100% complete. I'm sorry, the images aren't properly aligned to each other. But here you can see, it looks pretty much exactly like the master plan. That's the cove with the reception and arrival, back of house. These are your beach villas, the spa here, all day dining. This is the beach bar, which faces west because you want to see the setting suns. The spa here and the water villas. I'm just going to run through a few images of the construction of the island as it happens. And let's start with the guest rooms. How do we approach the design of the guest rooms? And like I was saying previously, when there is no reference to anything physical as we would conventionally see in a resort, let's say up in the hills or on the beaches in Goa or anywhere else in the world, there is an anchor point. There's an anchor point of physical parameters in and around the site that become our guiding principles for our designs. And this is not unique to me. It's all of us work like that. So we had to rely on things very ephemeral. What are the shadows telling us, for example? Can that become a pattern on our cushions, and how we're going to evolve that into a color tone. And you'll see that as we go, how that becomes a language that runs through our entire design process. Like I said, there was some other architect on board. So this is what he had done, and my client didn't want it, so he got us on board. We go on to making visual textures or visual boards, or many of you call it mood boards. I like to call it style sheets, but these speak to us. They tell us something. They inform us the proposition of colors, textures, materiality, and the underlying principle that everything is very simple, very honest, very unadulterated, so to speak. And Maldives, if many of you know, is amongst the lowest lying lands in the world. It's primarily flat. Its highest point from mean sea level is only about 1.5 meters per se. So there are no mountains to be seen. So what are the material references that you can come on with? So we rely on the historical relationship of Maldives being on the trade route between Africa and China, between Africa, India, and Sri Lanka. And this gives us a lot of material to work with. For example, these old cupboards. Now, one thing that we need to keep in mind is when you're building in Maldives, it's not like building on land anywhere else where, hey, I've run out of a bag of cement, send someone to the shop. It's not possible. So you've got to plan everything, and that part of the planning, of course, not of buying nails and cement, but the sequencing of events of building also comes on the architect, the interior designers, the consultants. Your building has to be very tactile in the sense that a great part of it should be able to be made elsewhere, shipped over, and installed on site. So it's almost like a lot of it is flat packed. Moving from the visual style boards, we try and make a reference of that into our plans and ensure that the color palette is flowing through in every dimension of the building, whether it's in plan or it's in elevation. But everything needs to complement what you see outside your window, because the views outside are far more profound than anything you could possibly design or fabricate inside your rooms. So this is the beach villa. It has its own dip pool. You walk down the steps and walk a few meters into the water. So it's important to orient your activity in the room to the views outside. So the bed is facing the window and the water. Your study table also looks out. Of course, the bathroom doesn't get views, so we create its own internal views. Many a times we have time to do a 3D rendering, and I'll show you some of the 3D renders that we've done for this project. But many a times we don't have time to do 3D renders. So we try and do as close as possible photorealistic renders of the elevations. We put every material, we source it, we locate it, we identify its cost, and we build it into our designs. So the end product will end up looking exactly like what we have. The furniture selection, very important for us. And I will show you especially this image here, number 11. It's made of wood and electrical wires. So it's interwoven together into electrical wires. So everything needs to be conducive of allowing someone to feel very relaxed, very free, very unbound, so to speak. Of course, we do all the bathroom wear selection. These are the beach villas under construction, and all of them has got water views. This is the finished photographs of the project, and you can see many of the textures and materials and colors to a great extent of authenticity transfer from our designs into what gets eventually built. That's the bathroom looking out into its own views. This was as soon as it was built, the landscape was a bit immature at that time, and it's become quite amazing now. The color palettes. For us, the color palettes, and like for many architects and many young designers who are probably listening to this, it is the backbone of what we do. Those materials talk to us. They tell us something. They tell us a story. When you touch it, you feel what it is going to be like when you're in that space. To me, at least, it's like that. The water villa. Similarly, we run every space through a visual narrative that ties the guest rooms, the public areas, landscapes, all of that together. That continuity is very important. This is the water villa. The blue is the water. It's literally floating on water. Oh, we missed out the bridge here, but that's where you enter and there are views out. Everything is oriented to the views, the bathtub, your day beds, your nets. Some of the elevations. The color palette for the water is a little different. Conventionally, you'd say, hey, the water is blue, so things have to be blue. Now, there are no hard and fast rules, so long as they're earthy, warm, and very consumable colors. I think it's okay to be non-relative to what you see outside. That's our color palette, the actual materials that go into the space. This is the presidential suite. Again, a similar logic that runs through it. That's the layout of the presidential suite. You enter from there. That's the living room. The dining's outside. This got replaced with a dining table. And it's got 2 bedrooms, one on either side. The material palette for the master bedroom, its elevations. But I'll quickly take you to the construction photographs. So the presidential suite is right at the end of that almost 1 kilometer long walkway. And as the project's coming up. So this is on one side of it. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I have some kind of technical problem. Just give me a second. Oops. Sorry about that. So starting from building, piling into the water, creating platforms to put the villas on, to something like that. I think the journey is just very, very sensational and surreal. These are the images that I was telling you about. These are made from electrical wires, and just we figure out how to weave them together. We work with craftsmen who do that for us, and we pick up the colors of the wires and how the weave is going to happen. And this is the finished product. The bathrooms. This is one of my favorites. I love this one a lot. The macrame curtains. And a lot of this stuff is made in India. The jute rugs. And there you are on the water. Let's look at the public areas, the reception lobby. Again, given the kind of climate we have here, which is generally pleasant through the year, and it can get a bit warm. The key to it is allowing for cross ventilation if you're not going to have air conditioning in it, and how you bring a sense. This is the first place you land into when you get to the resort. And this is the place which is going to determine your mood in the way are going to be stressed, overwhelmed by the decor of this space, and that's going to set the mood for the rest of your stay. So it's important for the space to be very, in a way, informal. That's the layout. You get dropped off, and I'll show you in one of the aerial views. The boat drops you off at the bottom. You walk in, come through a pavilion, and along a central axis with water, your reception tables looking out into the water, and the waiting area is literally floating on the ocean. So this is one of our 3D renders that we had done for the space early on. Some of the elevations, the material selection or the furniture selection. At this point, I'd like to draw your attention to the creation of, we did all the visuals for the print work that would go eventually on the cushions and the covers. And like I said, it comes from the ephemeral things that we had seen around the site. So that's the under construction. The boat would drop you off, you walk around and into the reception. On the other end, the buggy picks you up and takes you to your room. That's the finished images. That's the reception. The material palette, a great amount of honesty to original textures, worn out wood, you just use it the way it is. The pool bar, just quite a large space actually, oriented to the west. So it's quite important that the bar, when you're sitting at the bar, you're looking out into the water and not against the wall. So the bar is partly undercover, partly outside, so that people using the bar can also, using the pool can also use the bar. That's the rendering. The furniture for the place, and that's under construction. And that's what we have finally. The materials, the all-day dining, and the great thing about all these public spaces, they're all non-air conditioned. There is just no ACs, or there is no mechanical form of ventilation other than fans. That's the layout with, you enter from the back here. These are the public toilets. The kitchen is way back there. There's some private dining, and then there's mostly seating on the water. That's one of the renders that we did for that space. The furniture, materials, that's some of the images under construction. And that's a photograph. And that's when it's built. The specialty restaurant, much like all the other spaces, follow the similar logic, trying to create a visual texture, not an identity, but a texture that kind of connects with a context that is around us. And this one completely floats on the water. You enter from there. There's a little champagne bar, and then most of the dining is around the water. No railings, but just nets to protect you from falling over. That's the render. The furniture, and we get to construction. One of the things that I could not get my hands on is obviously the sketches and the construction drawing package, because as you know, our office is closed. So this wall, very interesting. This is made from dead reefs, which get collected on site when you're pumping the sand in. So a lot of that goes into forming our walls. Yeah, spa is one of my favorites. I love designing spas. So that's the reception, pulled away from the main spa area. That's where you check in, you walk over the water. These are your treatment rooms, and all the beds and the bathtubs are oriented to the views outside. And back there is a small office and pantry and, you know, foot massage and a salon and everything. Render, one of my sketches. That's one of the pictures when a very good indication of how you start building on it with the absence of land below. And that's the finished project. Oh, that's me. Thanks, Guy. That brings me to the end of my presentation. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Rahul. That was so mesmerizing. And just to see the amount of attention to detail and the authenticity to which the design has been taken, the construction has been taken, has been phenomenal. Before we jump into the question answer round, thank you, Isha, for having us on board and for us to be able to do this workshop with you. Everyone, you can follow us on Node Workshops, Node_workshops on Instagram. If you have any questions or anything, you can write to us at info@nodeworkshops.com. And yes, and we'll be having a really nice workshop coming up on Friday with Aparna Vadhiva, who will be running us through wardrobe styling and wardrobe designing a wardrobe and understanding what goes behind it. So now I'm going to start taking on the questions. So can you specify the materials that have been used? Can you specify the materials that have been used in the project? Could you elaborate a little more on them?
You know, honestly, a palette of materials is very, very simple. I could count it on one hand. We have the upcycled dead reef, which we use as a wall cladding. We have a lot of salvaged wood, which we acquired from old projects in Indonesia and also parts of India and Sri Lanka. We have very minimal amount of glass, and mostly it's plaster and paint, nothing else. And it's heavy on the FF&E, the furniture, fittings, and equipment. A great amount of attention and detail has gone into that because that's literally in the scale of human existence, in the sense that you can feel the contact of the texture of the fabric in a chair as opposed to you feeling the texture of the wood on the buildings outside. So I would say 5 materials, and they rigorously go through every space in different levels of finish. That same wood could be polished in some place, but it could be used in its absolute raw form in the other. And by doing that, it gives us tremendous variation in one material, and it looks different, it feels different, just by changing the finish of it.
Okay. I think what everybody also wants to know is how did you go about constructing the different elements in the project? Could you elaborate on the construction of the structures?
let's start from the basics, right? First of all, you need to make the island. So the island is made from pumping this white sand from the ocean bed, and within an area the government gives you. You can't bring the sand from elsewhere. You've got to use the same sand. So first you got to build the island. And when the island's built, the buildings that go on the island are built like anywhere else, like on land. It's got a footing, it's got a substructure, an RCC structure, and a roof on it. But what's complicated is when you're building on the water. So you start with doing precast piles. So these precast piles are like literally like these giant nails which are hammered into place, and up to a point where it hits rock, or it hits a surface where it's safe to put more load on it. And then once the piles are done, they're all interconnected with precast concrete girders, and they're literally tied together with a nut and bolt. And on top of that, you build, when you build on water, your buildings have to be as light as possible. So there is no stone, there is no brick, there is no plaster. You're building purely with wood, maybe aluminium, but it's generally wood. So all the walls, the substructure, the main structure and the roof is all made out of wood.
Okay. Were there any safety measures taken care for in the event of any calamities?
A very good question. Last time when Maldives was hit by the tsunami, I believe this was in the early 2000s, that was affected by all of us, that affected many countries, including Bali, Sri Lanka, India, and some parts um, of Maldives. Now, when a tsunami happens, no one can design anything that is going to withstand a tsunami. That's impossible. So you just go with the flow there. But luckily in Maldives, Maldives does not have cyclones. Maldives does not have typhoons. Maldives does not have earthquakes. It does have heavy winds, but those winds are similar to the ones you would experience on the west coast of India. So you're not designing anything special because there are no special climatic conditions. And just to answer that question, we have just started designing a resort on the east coast of India in Puri. And Puri, as you know, is a massively, I know I'm digressing from your question, but it kind of helps answer that. Puri is a cyclone prone zone. Every year there is one cyclone which has got quite devastating impact. We've been doing a lot of research to how to design for a condition like that. And one of the things that you need to do when you're designing in high winds of that nature is you can't have a solid building. You can't have a building which is solid, facing the direction of the wind, because cyclonic winds can come from anywhere. Your cyclone could be there, but the winds could come from somewhere else. It's all a bit crazy. So what is important in situations like that is almost like building in seismic areas. Your building needs to be one component, and so that if it moves all together. But what's important in cyclonic conditions is that you allow the wind to pass through. So your buildings needs to have breaks in it. So your building can't be, if you're building a room block, your room block can't be continuous. It's got to be broken so that the winds can pass through and the damage will be far less. Luckily in Maldives, they do not have a recorded history of cyclones.
That's good to know. So coming back to the materials, is there a humidity issue? How do you take care of that with the materials that you have used?
Yes, I mean, that's a very good question. Like I said, the materials are very simple, very easy to use in any climatic condition. And Maldives is a very humid place. I don't know the exact number of its humidity or percentage of its humidity, but it is humid. The wood that you use has to be properly dried. That's very important. If you don't dry it properly, then the variation in expansion and contraction is what causes it to warp, bend, or crack. So that needs to be very well taken care of. And rest of all, it's just paint. So that performs well in humidity. Shweta, I can't hear you. Shweta, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was muted by mistake. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
So, could you give us a little more information about how you built the flooring and the ceiling for these structures?
Is in the structure of it or the finish of it?
I think the material, the construction, and the finishes.
Okay, so there are two kinds of buildings here: the buildings that are on land and the buildings that are on water. The buildings on water inherently need to be as light as possible because it's got a conditional footing system. It's not like it's on land. It's sitting on the ocean bed. So that is, like I said, an RCC framework with pilings, and then you build, after that, it's just timber decks, timber for construction, including the walls, including the floors, including the roof, everything. And then you finish it off with what do you call that? Thatch. In the landed part of it, you can build like any other place. It's like building on land. So yes, even in that sand, you need some degree of piling, but not exactly like the ones in the water. But rest of that, some of them are wooden structures, some of them are concrete structures. So it's a mix of both. So there are two systems of building.
So coming to the plumbing and sanitation, how do you tackle that on a project like this?
So in Maldives, interestingly, right, since you're on an isolated island by yourself, you've got to create infrastructure for everything. You've got to desalinate your own water, which means you need a desalination plant. You've got to collect all the waste from the toilets, and it goes into a filtration or a processing plant where the solid waste then goes into a manuring system, and that goes into the landscape, and the gray water is used to water the landscape. All your solid waste, like there's no plastic on the island, so they, at least in this resort, they don't allow you to bring any plastic with you. So before you check in, they tell you, please don't bring any plastic with you, and if you do, you got to take it back with you. So the amount of plastic is inherently reduced. And on the island, they don't serve you anything in plastic. So everything that happens, you've got to create the infrastructure for recycling.
That's really interesting.
And the electricity is partly diesel generated. And I think 50% of it is solar, because they've got almost, I would say, I can't remember the exact number, but almost 180 or 190 days of very intense sunshine. So yeah, all the roofs of the back of house have got solar panels on it.
That's really interesting to me.
So all these resorts in the Maldives, the reason they're so expensive is because there is no infrastructure, there is no common infrastructure to rely on. It's like a mini city. You have to generate, you're responsible for your own electricity, your own water, your own waste management. So the cost of that is divided only by one place, and therefore it's expensive.
Thank you. So now, how sustainable is constructing this property in the middle of an ocean with and considering its ecological impact to the surroundings?
You know what? I'll answer this question very brutally, honestly. No, it's not very ecologically sustainable. It's not. Because at the end of the day, you're building over existing reefs, you're building over existing, but a place like Maldives has got no other option. It's their biggest revenue earner for the country. So what the government does is when they auction out these sites, they identify sites which will have minimum impact on the existing marine life. And there's nothing like minimal impact, there's always an impact. But also what the developer is responsible in doing is any live reef that is alive and living has to be transplanted. You've got to physically, divers need to go into the water, take it and move it to a safer location. You can't just move it anywhere because the reef is very sensitive to light. It has to be oriented in a very specific direction, a specific place, and you create a piece of land, or you create a land which is not going to cause significant damage to the marine life. Apart from that, it's impossible to say that it is 100% sustainable.
Are you a big girl? Are you allowed to cry?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, we just had a little bit of disturbance there.
Okay. So thank you, Shanali. Sorry, Rahul, you were saying, could you please continue?
No, I was saying that it's not, it's impossible for a resort of this nature or any other resort which is built in the middle of the ocean anywhere in the world. It can't be 100% sustainable, but it's driven by the need of human sustenance. And a place like Maldives, I'll just give you a very an example. Maldives has got a lot of tuna fishing is big in Maldives, right? But the processing of the tuna, they've got limited infrastructure to process it. So it has to go somewhere else, to some other country, processed and come back. So all the materials that go into the construction, not only in this resort, anywhere in Maldives, could be on Malay Island, comes from elsewhere. The bricks, the sand, the cement, the metal bars, everything either comes from India, Sri Lanka, or the Middle East or Africa. So there is an inherent human energy consumption because most of the material is traveling long distances to get here, but people need to survive.
Right. It's a balance between figuring out the...
Yeah.
All right. Does the local culture affect your design thinking process, and specifically in this scenario here?
In most of our projects, yes, to a great extent. But in this one, we tried to stay away from it because the connectivity to culture is quite removed, because the cultural hotspots are in islands that could be as far as 5 hours boat ride or a 2-hour flight away from where you are. So the crossover of that therefore becomes only theoretical and not physical or real. So we try to rely on what is around us, what is under us, and what your eyes can see and your body can feel, and of which is very little, ripples in water, the sun shining, the shadows, or an airplane landing in the far distance, a water plane landing in the far distance. So you rely on visual memories of those sorts. So no, in this project, the cultural context was far removed, so we didn't quite rely on that, no.
But all of that is pretty universal anyway, right? I think that really speaks to all of us anyways. The sunshine, the sand,
what your body feels, yeah.
Yes. How were you able to manage supervising the project and working with craftsmen on site in these remote locations?
Okay, I must confess here that we as a practice, we don't supervise construction. If we were to supervise a construction of this big a site, I don't think we'd have any time left to design. So the way we work is is very important. And unfortunately, I don't have construction drawings to show you, which I did want to, but I didn't have access to the server today. So before we go into construction, Shweta, we make sure that we have detailed our construction drawings um, to the last nail in the wall, you know, to the last crevice of joinery of how one material comes together. A project like this, honestly, would have over 15,000 drawings, literally. Like every space would have at least 1,000 odd drawings on it, minimum. So we document, our documentation is very, very, very thorough, and we do take a lot of pride in it. And the reason of that is purely from a business point of view. The more time you spend in the office doing stuff, the more profitable your project can be, the more profitable your business can be. And I think this is important for many of the young designers who are listening to us today. Is it's great to go to site, but if you have to run to site every day, no business can be profitable. Because in a place like India, let's look at the context, right? If I have to go to a site meeting in Gurgaon, which is an hour's drive on a good day when no traffic from my home or my office, 1 hour drive. If I go for a 1 hour meeting, my whole day is gone because one, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, it's dusty and it's hot on site. There is, even if I finished at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, I don't have the energy left to work, which means for a 2 hour site meeting, my whole day is gone. Now, if you were to do a very solid, bulletproof set of construction drawings, or as bulletproof as you can make it, your need to monitor things on site become limited, because a project manager or the client's team who's managing the construction on site can write into you, hey, can you clarify this? I don't understand this detail. You can either send him a picture of another detail you've done in another project, or you can sketch over it and send it to him. So we do go to site. That doesn't mean we don't go to site, but we only go to site for milestone meetings. You know, let's say there is a significant mock-up of an construction element to be done, we'd go to site. If there is a mock-up of the furniture to be done, we'll go to the factory. But yeah, we don't manage construction on site. Would be impossible. So it's important to have a very solid set of construction documents.
Sorry. So would something like a BIM analysis help you in your projects? Do you use them?
Like a building information management?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. We don't use it all the time because honestly speaking, not many people in our team know it, neither do I. We still rely on the good old and the limitations of AutoCAD. But yes, we have been doing some projects like this one that I was talking to you about in Maldives. In Puri, near Bhubaneswar, by the beach. We are going to be using a BIM software to manage a lot of our weather analysis, for example, trying to model the building with hurricane winds traveling at 120 kilometers an hour. God, we can't do that on AutoCAD. But this project was relatively simple, so we didn't have to. But yeah, we partly do and mostly don't, so to speak.
So how long does a project like this take from conception to realization?
You know, this is the project that I've built the fastest in my life. We built this from design to execution was in about 18 months, because these guys build really fast. This particular client, they build like in January of 2018, we started the second phase of it, the other resort, and it's almost done. We're going to be going to photograph it in the next, I would say, 3 or 4 months. So in 2 years' time, they build a resort which is 2 times the size of this. This is 5 hectares, that's 10 hectares, and twice the amount of room. So these guys build fast, but that does not mean every project we build is built in a year's time. We've done, in my career, I've done hotels which I started when I joined HBA in 2007, it's still not ready. 13 years later, we're still tinkering around with it. So every project is different, you know, Shweta, everyone comes with its own challenges. Sometimes the client runs out of money. Sometimes we have a falling out with the client and then we have to patch it up like lovers and get along. So, so there is no, this was unusual. We built it really fast.
So I'm going to touch upon the topic of COVID-19 and what do you think about how that's going to affect the hospitality industry?
Oh my God, this is a very difficult question because I think as soon as the lockdown opens, I'm going out on the street like everyone else. I don't give a shit whether I get COVID, but definitely lives are going to change. It is not going to be the same. I was hearing someone speak yesterday and it made a lot of sense to us. You know, the, the big change that's going to happen is air travel is going to be different. Many of us, someone like me, I spend honestly over 150 days a year in a hotel room and I am on a flight every other day. Every second day I'm on a plane. For me, this break has been incredible. I feel very rejuvenated, but I don't think I'm getting on a flight for the next 2-3 months, maybe 6 months. So if air travel changes, the trickle down effect happens on the entire hospitality industry. But what that also means is that I think a very different kind of hospitality is going to evolve. One that is within your traveling reach, whether in which you can get in the safety of your car and drive to. So hospitality will evolve. I don't think it's going to hit bedrock. Just the way we consume hospitality is going to change. Maybe I'm not going to go to Maldives on a holiday, not that I can afford it, but I may go to a beautiful resort in Nashik from Bombay or from maybe in the Aravalli Hills from Delhi. I don't know where, but somewhere where I know that I'm going to be safe in my car. So yeah, life's going to change. And as far as work is concerned, and many of the younger designers who are listening to me, make the best of it in the sense that figure out how you can run your business without having a physical office. Physical office, especially places like Bombay and Delhi, is a lot of rent. Jesus Christ, more money than we make. So if you were to look at technology and leverage on it, like how we're doing, I mean, I've never done a presentation or a public speaking online like this. I've always been up on stage somewhere talking to people. But to me, this is equally efficient. And if we can do this, and you know, Isha and Shweta and Shonali, if you guys can pull this off, which you'll have so incredibly, so can design practices. Design practice, you need to meet a client. Honestly, if you look at the life cycle of a project, right? Concept, design, development, construction, drawing, you never need to go to site. You never need to go to site till it starts building, right? So hopefully by that time, COVID's going to all die, but it's time for us to rethink how we run our businesses. And definitely we are doing it. We're going to probably shrink our offices, save on rent, and be more financially efficient in the way we run our businesses. But the younger guys who are going to be starting the business, who have already started the businesses and taken places on rent, guys, leverage on technology. You can do it. You can do it without ever having to rent an office. And you can work with people remotely in different locations through apps like Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So we've got to use the learnings of this lockdown to be more efficient in the way we run our businesses. And that is going to happen. It is going to happen. It should happen.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think that's a really interesting point to take forward. Since you've been talking about businesses, and would you like to tell us about Studio HPA and how you function across the world?
I know Isha and I were talking about this before everyone got on board. Honestly speaking, we run our business like anyone else. It's survival every day. But one thing which I think is very, very incredible about HPA is that if you have the drive, you have the talent, you have the entrepreneurial spirit, there is a place for you in HPA, because we're not a pyramid structure. You know, we're not like that, and there's one person on the top who trickles down the designs to the bottom. We are a firm of a decentralized nucleus. We are multiple little businesses within the big business, and the big daddy HBA is there to support us in terms of its 55 years of being in the forefront of hospitality design, the intelligence and the body of work that comes with it, and the human resource that comes with it is available to all of us. And you just need to be able to reach out to people. And also, you can be your own designer, like me. I mean, I come from a small town of Goa. I traveled all over the world, and somehow found my home in HPA. Started Studio HPA about 12 years back, at a time when we were in the previous depths of recession, when everything went down to the ground. I started Studio HBA purely thinking of how HBA could work on smaller projects that could never come to HBA because of the price tag of going to HBA and the price tag that comes with an immense history and lineage. So starting from one office with one person, I know Isha, Isha, if you're listening to me, Isha and I were the
Of course,
first.
I'm right here. I'm listening to all of it.
Isha from my office.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, so we're the first two people. We did everything by ourselves, you know, and those were days when technology was limited. I would receive fax to the hotels that I stayed in. I would mark up and fax it back the night. So it was all kind of a circus. But in 10 years, we've come a long way. We do incredible work. Abby in Bombay does phenomenal work. The teams in Delhi do great work. And not just in India, we're doing work in diverse locations of the world. And that makes me very proud. And with an all Indian team, we're doing bloody awesome. I love that.
Yes, you are. And we look forward to seeing what you have on your
Thank
plate
you.
next.
Thank you.
So I think another question that has come up a couple of times is, how do you incorporate these concepts and ideas to a residential setting?
Shweta, can you repeat that question?
Sorry.
I lost you.
How do you incorporate the idea of this barefoot luxury in an urban residential setting?
In an urban, you know, you could do barefoot luxury anywhere, honestly speaking. The key to, I think, barefoot luxury is honesty of material. Every material comes with its intrinsic beauty, and the beauty of that depends on how you treat that material, how you finish that material. You've got to understand something, that no matter what you do to that material, how you manipulate that material, always keep in mind that the original properties of that material should not be lost. I'll give you an example. Let's say you build with pine wood. You made a wall with pine wood, and we all know that pine wood has this yellowish tinge to it. I hate pine wood. I'd never use it. And the only way I would use pine wood is to paint over it. But the reason I'm talking about pine wood is because it's a very recognizable material. Whatever you do to it, however you treat it, whatever surface treatment you put on it, its intrinsic quality should not be compromised. That honesty has to be there in every material you use. And a material that you can recognize as a guest who walks in, or consumer of that space who walks in, and being able to identify that material allows you to bond with it. The moment you overwhelm your senses with materials that do all the blingy jargon, it's like, oh my God, where should I look? My eyes are bouncing. Should I look at the chandelier, the floor, or where do I look exactly? What that does is it puts my guards up, a space that allows you to put your guards down and make you feel like, hey, it's okay for me to walk across this floor with bare feet, or a fancy Louis Vuitton. I mean, whoever thinks Louis Vuitton is fancy, I don't, but walk with your Louis Vuitton shoes on it or your Ferragamo shoes on it. It's okay, whatever you want to be, so long as it allows you to be you and not someone else. That is important. And I think you can do that in any space, whether it is a residence, it's a resort, or it's an urban hotel, anywhere. Honesty to materials.
I think that's a nice takeaway, honesty to materials. So if there was, if there's, is there a unique feature, according to you, in this particular project that you have tried to incorporate? Is there something very, very specific for this particular project?
To incorporate into
The design, into the,
like I was previously saying, right? Literally, I counted the materials on my 5 fingers, and those 5 materials can be used in every material can be made another material by just changing its surface properties. Like, I'll give you an example. We've seen black granite, right? Black granite, the polished black galaxy granite, as we call it. The more you polish it, the darker it gets. Inherently, when it comes out of the quarry, it's a gray color. The more you polish it, the darker it gets. And the more rough you make the surface, the lighter it gets. Now, the material is the same. All you're doing is changing its surface properties. And by changing its surface properties, you're creating an entirely new material, but you can still identify that it's a granite. So just by changing surface properties, one material can give you multiple materials. And it's still that material because you haven't done anything. You haven't taken granite and put acrylic paint on it. You've just chipped the surface off in a different way to give it a different feel. So same thing with every material. For example, plaster, right? You could apply plaster with a trowel finish and make it smooth. You could take a pitchfork and do a pattern on it, but the material is the same. Nothing is changed. You just change the surface property of intrinsically the material is the same. It's like me, I could wear a suit or I could wear a kurta. Me is me, right? So long as the personality of that material is not blemished, it's not hidden, it's not concealed, you do a great job. But understanding the personality is important. That's what we've done in this project. Stick to that everywhere.
and in this particular project, is there any one feature that you personally love that you have, that you're really proud of?
Oh, let me think. I like the bathrooms. They're quite sexy. That's my favorite. That bathtub with a glass window. Oh, I wish I could afford to go there one day.
Me too. I would love to hop on a plane and go there, but when we can.
Yeah.
So tell us about the furniture. So where do you source all the furniture from? Is it made in India and brought there, or do you source from around?
Yeah. So before I answer this question specifically, I would like to talk about our attitude towards materiality and including furniture. Is no matter in which geographic locations we design projects in, we're doing work in Mauritius, we're doing work in Maldives, everywhere in the world I have designed, there is accessibility to materials in that country. You can get stuff made. In Maldives, there is nothing. You can't get furniture made there. So we had to get most of it made in India, in Bali, and some of it in China. But as a general principle in my practice, whether it is our offices in Bombay, Delhi, Singapore, wherever, local. We've stopped buying or specifying anything made outside the geographical boundaries of India. Two things happens with that. Is you support local industry, you reduce your carbon footprint because you're not transporting stuff from thousands of miles away, and you create job opportunities within your geographical boundaries. So most of our projects, everything, if it's in India, everything comes from India. Um, and since in Maldives, that option wasn't possible, we had to get it from wherever.
So would you expand a little bit on the kind of budgets that this kind of property would have?
You mean the lump sum figure? I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't be able to give you a budget. But most of the times, the way we work, Shweta, is we ask our clients to give us a number, right? And what we say to our clients is that, and this is what I believe very strongly, very deeply, that beauty has got nothing to do with money, nothing whatsoever, right? You could do incredible stuff with limited means. Look at the works of Jeffrey Bawa, Laurie Baker, who built within a radius of X kilometers from the site. Amazing stuff, right? Incredibly sensual, very touching stuff. So we work backwards. So we say to a client, hey, you tell me what is the figure you want to spend on this resort, right? Let's say he says 100 crores. How much of that is for architecture, interior design? Tell me that. So he's able to break that down, right? Let's say that's 60% of the cost. Now I tell him, I will manage that 60%, right? Out of 100 crores, 60 crores, I will manage. Don't tell me you want this, you want that. I will decide. I might spend 1 crore on a chandelier or a light fitting, but I might spend 20 rupees a square foot on the tile. It's up to me to give you the best I can with that crore. So I'll work within that budget. So most of our projects work backwards from a budget, as opposed to me saying, hey, you know what? I want you to give me 100 crores to design this resort. I'm going to be out of business.
That's an interesting way of approaching that. So would you give us some sort of advice for all the young designers and freshers who are out there uh, in the hospitality business, or just generally starting out a new firm, or starting out fresh? What would you like to say to them?
I've got two things to say. One is with regards to the current situation, the unprecedented situation that all of us are facing. There's never been a time in the world history, I think, where Shweta, you sitting in Bombay and me sitting in Delhi, which is whatever 2,000 kilometers apart, are faced by the same threat at the same time. Or me sitting in Singapore and my friends sitting in Melbourne are faced with the same threat. It's unprecedented. But let's look at the bright side of it. For us designers, including us, the older, the mature ones, it is a great time to see what technology can do for you. You know, first of all, see how you can work remotely. Get rid of a brick and mortar office, right? If you need to meet with your team once a week, hire a place in a co-working space, or meet in a cafe, meet wherever, or meet your team for drinks, right? Because of course, physical contact is important. Physical proximity is important. Use technology to manage your cost, because the moment the lockdown opens up, we are hitting some crazy business time. All our fees are going to go downwards. They weren't going upwards year on year. Now they're going to go even low. So you've got to think how you can use this to your advantage, technology. So use it immensely. I have a lot of meetings with my teams through the day and my clients on Skype, and it's amazing. Sorry, on Zoom or sometimes on Microsoft Teams. There are so many softwares that I have found that completely take away the need for me to use paper completely. So, and I will share it with everyone today. So before this lockdown happened, Shweta, I was panicking. I wanted to go buy a printer. because I like to sketch, take pictures, send it over, right? Shit, 20-second, everything closed, no printer. But sometime in the beginning, in the middle of last year, I'm not tech savvy, but I'm very interested in how people develop apps. And I heard of this app called Morpholio Trace. And what Morpholio Trace does is it allows you to sketch both in 2D and in 3D as you would do on a tracing paper. It also has yellow tracing paper, right? And it's super efficient. Your drawings look amazing, and it looks as if you've put a tracing paper and drawn over it. And the good thing of that is that you can draw to scale, right? You can sketch to scale as if you're using a triangular scale or a rotary scale to do it. And that completely took away the need for me to have paper. I could work on the size of a table, which is my iPad, right? Or a tablet. So if COVID hadn't happened, I would never have started using that app, right? And now I realize that, bloody hell, I don't need a printer anymore. I saved my whatever 2,000 rupee printer I was going to buy. So I have found ways and means to make myself available, approachable, reachable, and also to be able to do my work. And there's technology for all of that. So let's leverage on it. So that's my advice. The other advice is, shit, I forgot. I said two. Spoke about one. I forgot the other. I'm sorry.
All right. Thank you so much, Rahul. This is a really lovely session, and we're so happy you could come on board.
Thank
And
you.
there's
Thank you
so
so
much
much.
to learn from you and
Happy.
how you started Studio HPA.
Yeah. Any more questions? I'm happy to take some more.
Guys, if you have questions, this is your time to put them in. I think I see one. How has the history and culture of this country affected your design process?
A very deep question, this one. India's history is so layered and complex, and I wouldn't say that India does not have collective history. Yes, I mean, colonialism was the only collective history we had. But if you go beyond colonialism, India's history is very checkered. You know, it's almost like many countries within the geographical boundaries of India. So when we design in different locations in India, we try and be very specific, not even to the history of the state or the province, but the history of around that site. And it's amazing the kind of stuff you can find about a project. Like just this morning, I was working on a project. I'm referring to it again because this is what I was working this morning before speaking to you all, working on this resort on the island, on the coastal town of Puri. And I've been to Puri, and it's not a beach like Goan Beach or a beach in Kerala. It's different. But the amount of cultural references you can find just in a boundary of 20 kilometers of that site is very different from the cultural context and history of Bhubaneswar, which is 90 kilometers away. So why wouldn't I rely on that as opposed to going all over the state? So every place has its own history, its own culture, its own subculture, its own context, and we try to get into the neighborhood stories these days. And we love that.
Great.
So to answer your question broadly, yes, very influenced by it.
Right. So could you give us suggestions on what materials and designs could one select when it comes to designing hotels on land for, say, Delhi?
You know, the beauty of us being creative professionals is that we see things in things that many people don't. I feel like a humble plaster and paint is such a beautiful material, but we only think of plaster being applied in a flat dimension, but plaster can be applied in 1 million ways. You can apply, like I said, with a trowel. You can also apply it with your hand. And when light shines on it, if it's slightly rough, the kind of shadow patterns it creates, it's a whole different dimension. Whereas light grazing on a flat wall is different. So my approach to design, honestly speaking, I'm going to take a completely parallel comparison here. And most of you from Bombay have been to the Bombay canteen, right? Floyd Cardo's, bless his soul. I would say an incredibly genius chef. Genius, absolute genius. Every time I went to Bombay, I always go to the Bombay canteen for dinner. And do you know why I go to Bombay canteen for dinner? You can open his menu. Everything on his menu, right? Every ingredient in his menu can be found at your local butcher shop. You can find it in the local fish market, and you can buy all the dry groceries from your kirana wala. But what he makes out of that is nothing short of magic. And all of you who've been to Bombay canteen will definitely agree with me that the food at the Bombay canteen is sensational. We're architects. Architects are like that. You should be able to go to the local hardware and see something and see what people don't see in it. And what they don't see is what you can make out of it. Because plaster is only plaster till you have shined light on it. And what kind of light, what quality of light, what lux level, do you want a wash or do you want scallops, will change the property of that wall altogether. And here we're not even talking about color on that wall. I'm just talking about cement and sand and water mixed together, right? So depending on the temperature of the light color or the temperature of the light, the appearance of your wall can change. So hotels also don't need fancy materials. You don't need to run to Italy to buy marble. You know, you can use marble from whatever you can find. Your approach to design should be, what can I find at my hardware store and how can I use it intelligently? That should be the approach. And we do take that sometimes, and sometimes we run to Italy to buy marble. So I'm a hypocrite.
What are the latest trends that designers could follow in hospitality design, in particularly designing hotels in this changing scenario?
You know, you've got to look at it pre-COVID and post-COVID. Post-COVID, God knows what the hell is going to happen to the world and hospitality. Currently, all hotels are closed. And with social distancing, I don't know how people are going to be sitting on a table 200 mm or 20 centimeters from me and dining. But just let's look at what was happening in the hospitality world before COVID. Something very interesting was going on in the hospitality world, and something that I have been very passionate about. And to answer that question, I will take an example of a hotel I went to in Portland, Oregon many years back, before it completely disrupted the hospitality industry, and it was called the ACE Hotel, ACE, right? And the owners of Ace Hotel, he also passed away a couple of years back, but absolute genius. What he did was he said, hey, hospitality, look at how people are using public space with technology, right? Earlier on, if someone had to call someone, you had to go to the public telephone to call, right? Before you had landlines at home. Then came the Nokia cell phones. You could make the call from anywhere. Then iPhone came and the whole world changed. You can do everything on the iPhone today, right? Or I'm saying iPhone, but smartphones. And that affected the way people use public spaces in hotels. Hotel lobbies became public gathering spaces. And by gathering spaces, I don't mean to do political demonstrations, but the lobbies became places where someone could use your tablet and work. You were a home office, you could work from wherever. And what that meant is that your lobby suddenly created opportunities for revenues other than it only being a place for check-in and check-out. It became a place for retail. It became a place for having art exhibitions. And this just completely transformed the public areas. Also did a very interesting thing. These public areas then became so amazing for people to hang out that your room sizes could become smaller because people don't want to spend too much time in, no matter how big your room is, you can't spend a whole day in the room. So people were coming out into the public areas. The moment they come into the public area, someone buys a coffee, someone buys a croissant, someone buys a sandwich, the sales were changing. And also, that meant if your rooms became smaller, your whole entire footplate of the building became smaller. Then came the next wave. This went to the next level. A couple of years back, I stayed in a very beautiful hotel in London called the Hoxton. Now they've gone viral. They're all over the place. What Hoxton did was it said it became a bridge between your hotel and your neighborhood. So the people who worked in the hotel were people who knew the neighborhood. By neighborhood, I don't mean living in Hoxton and knowing something about Southwark. No, this is about living in Hoxton and knowing that neighborhood. Which is the best bar, which is the best pizza place, which is the best family-run Italian restaurant. And in London, you can buy whatever the hell you want. So suddenly, the hotel became a place for supporting local businesses as opposed to it being an insular, self-centered, money-making or a financial institution. It took the neighborhood in and it told its guests, hey, when someone asked, can you recommend me the best pizza place to go? He wasn't sending you to the fancy pizza place, but he was sending you to the hole in the wall place, which is run by one person who's got a family to support. So you see how that bridge happened. It brought a community together. And the biggest trend that was happening before COVID, and now I don't know how this is going to impact post-COVID, was that neighborhood-centric hotels became big. So every major brand in the world, right? Let's say Marriott has got Moxie hotels. What is it? A neighborhood-centric hotel. Hyatt has got Hyatt-centric. What is it? Neighborhood-centric. Uh, Intercontinental has got Kimpton and it's got Indigo hotels. What are they? They all celebrate neighborhoods. And which means your designs have to relate to the neighborhood. It's got to be a bridge to the neighborhood. It needs to include the neighborhood. Now, post-COVID, don't know what's going to happen with that because your lobbies are going to be like locker rooms, right? It's not going to be accessible for anyone who comes in and wants to work and have a coffee and spend 4 hours. It's going to be for the people who are staying there. So my fear is going to go back to square one before the Ace Hotel came about. So long story short, I don't know.
You can only wait and watch.
Yeah, let's wait and watch.
Um, so someone has a question. What if they're thinking of making a switch of profession uh, at the age of 35, 40? Do you think shifting to design at this point, is it too late without a formal training? Would you have any advice for someone who would like to do that?
You know, my advice is just do it. Life is too short and COVID's taught us that any one of us could pop anytime. If that's what you love to do, do it. It's never too late. If your calling is to do design, just go do it.
So you mentioned that Studio HPA is open to anyone who has drive. What kind of portfolios really stand out for you? And what kind of software would someone have to know before they apply to Studio HPA?
You know, just the common software we all use, SketchUp, AutoCAD. We do a bit of Revit. Revit will be very helpful to us. I see that becoming big for us in the future. I'm personally in this downtime, I'm teaching myself Revit, which I want to learn before the office is open. So yes, that's about the softwares and the illustrators and Photoshops that most people know. But I think what we are looking for in portfolios is the uniqueness of personalities, how you package yourself, how you're, you know, I will start with what you should not do in your portfolio, right? So we get 9 out of the 10 portfolios we receive out of candidates in India in both our offices is people not even bothering to draft a proper cover note. Hey, my portfolio attached. What am I supposed to do with it, right? And then images are loose files, AutoCAD drawings. No, it's got to be packaged. Graphically packaged portfolio tells a lot about you, more than the content of your designs. I don't really care whether your designs are amazing, under par, no, but your packaging needs to be brilliant, because that tells me that you care. And what you care is what we want, is people who care. And we're all constantly learning about design.
Rahul, I have one last question for you, and this is something that we've discussed in a conversation earlier, which is, I don't know how many people know about it, but could you tell us a little bit about the design clinic that you run?
Sorry?
Could you tell everyone about the design clinic that you've started in Goa?
Oh, I'm not sure whether I want to talk about it in this platform. I'm sorry, Shonali.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just thought it would be.
It's something that I do purely out of our love for Goa, my brother and me, and it's also a bit on its nascent stages. But it's just making design accessible to people, you know, people with simple needs who can't afford designers and have limited means to be able to just do better space planning, you know, just do better space planning, efficient space planning, and efficient construction methods, so they don't burn massive holes in their pockets. And in a way, also trying to keep the cityscape intact, because many of you who know Goa know that Goa's got a very unique architectural characteristic, and we're trying to make that, you know, preserve that, which most parts is dying. So it's like a pro bono thing.
That's great. Thank you, though. So I think we can wrap that up. Shweta, if we don't have any more questions, then we can wrap that up.
No, I think we're good. And in case if anybody has more questions, you can always send them in by email, and we'll try and get Rahul to answer them.
Yeah, I love responding to emails.
Thank you so much, Rahul. Thank you. That was really incredible. I mean,
Thank you so much, guys. Shweta, Shonali, thank you so much. I think this was an incredible session. And before I go, I just want to say that the stuff you all are doing is highly commendable. I mean, all of us do stuff with a financial interest, but what you guys doing is highly commendable. So thank you so much, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.